Welcome to Occult Science Radio, brother. How are you?
Oh, I am excellent, Curtis. Thank you so much for having me. I do want to say that it is an absolute honor to be on your show.
Yes, indeed. It's an honor to have you here, brother. And, I've been wanting to get you on the show for such a long time because you have so much to share. I've looked at your lectures and your website, and I was like, oh, man, this brother is just, a plethora of information. But before we get started, brother, please give us, just a brief background on yourself and what led you to the path that you're on now.
Well, in brief, I guess how I really got started was when I left the educational structures. I ended up venturing myself into Lockheed Aircraft when it was currently in Burbank, California. And I was given an opportunity to go into an orientation, which was no pay, 40 hours, and no guarantee of a job. And what they would do is they would literally put you through a process on a daily basis. And what happened is, like, on the fourth day after taking these tests, I was asked to leave. And at that point in time, I was kind of confused because I thought I was dismissed as I didn't make it. They said, no, you're going into processing, but when you go down the hall, you're going to turn left and follow the skunk. So I didn't really understand that until I made left. I went into processing, and they said, well, you're one of the highest in the class. We're going to put you into top secret projects. So we're going to process you for clearance, and within 6 months you'll move into top secret. So with that, after about 6 months, I was working in the commercial division for a while, and once I got my top secret clearance, they briefed me and they told me that from this day on, everything that you see and do will not be discussed. You will if anyone asks you what you do for a living, you will tell them what you've been doing for the last 6 months. So I went into I got a cipher code. I went into a special building. I entered the code and I entered the door every day. And this is when I guess I subconsciously took the red pill and started to go down the rabbit hole and realized that working with technologies that most people on the planet would never know exist. So finding that fine line of saturating myself with this knowledge, I realized that I hit kind of my fill within 3.5 years, and I didn't want to be a lifer there. And I realized that I wanted to do more. So I literally bowed out, and I moved into the motion picture industry doing special effects. And a lot of people wonder how did I go from there to that? But when you realize when we're doing special effects for Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, Robert Zemeckis, all the top name people, we're constantly pushing the cerebral cortex. We're never doing the same repetitive thing over and over again. And if it's a movie that is 30 years into the future or 150 years in the future, we have to expand our consciousnesses to bring the technology and the capabilities of building what the illustrators, what the designers, what the directors want. So it was, 23 years in the movie business created such a, so much stimulation within my consciousness, but it was being very subdued in the industry. And then I had an opportunity to kind of venture out. I was actually very stagnant for a little while after, I made a decision to close my effects company, having 18 employees and 20,000 square feet of absolute, amazing manufacturing. We could build just about anything in that facilities. Made the decision it was time to close it because almost all the business was leaving the country. It was in Canada, it was in Prague. And so I produced a couple films in the interim and then opened up a DVD business. And when I opened up this DVD business, I started taking on esoteric titles. And I obtained a client who had a very incredibly vast library of knowledge databases. And they started me with that knowledge. And I started converting David Icke's and William Henry's and different types of crop circle DVDs. And watching some of these started to inspire my thought process to go deeper, and it was like a wake-up call for me. And I started to take that journey and go deeper and deeper, and it actually, these certain switches came on about 7 years ago, and I had a thirst to go deeper and to bring technologies that could better the human system and shift us into a higher state of consciousness. So with that, in my journey, I went really as deep as I possibly could and brought forth what we call today the life stream generator, which is based on Nikola Tesla's research back in 1899 and 1900 when he was working on etherical binding energies, or what he called radiant energy. But what happens to the human, or actually almost all life on this planet, once it's reintroduced to these energy fields, we become very present. And the illusion field is actually momentarily removed, and we become such in the state of the present moment ourselves within our human system shifts. And, of course, our minds immediately realize that there's a different aspect, and we start seeing the bigger picture. We remove the energetic blinders or the limitation programs that we've been putting ourselves in. So witnessing this for over 6 years in my journey, traveling the world, working with energetic fields, working with thousands of people, and watching the same result out of 99% of the people, when all of a sudden they move from the stresses, they move from the illusions of being out of the present moment, and all of a sudden you reintroduce them into the present moment, and they become totally different before your eyes. And so many people get to witness that at the same time. So that has been my journey, up to this day, in a nutshell, my background. I hope that helps.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And before we go into the other subjects, I need to learn more about the live stream generator, because, ever since I saw it on your website, and he has a tremendous website, family. His website is zeropointresearch.com. That's www.zeropointresearch.com. And there you will see the tremendous machines that he created, as well as his video content. This man is extraordinary. Please tell us more about the live stream generator and what benefit it has to us, when we begin to use it. You also make some amulets as well, the Oculus amulet. But let's start off with the live stream generator. I really would like to hear more about that.
Oh, yes. Well, the live stream, when I built the prototype itself, and I really had to grasp and go really deep, because I was working with state-of-the-art technology, but then in my research I realized that we made this turn, a few decades ago into a whole different approach of technology. Most people might remember when in the 70s when the silicone was introduced into our technology and we started using microprocessors that were based on silicone wafers. But before that, we were using solid-state technology with mechanical, mostly coil wound. Everything was like hand-built, but not using the silicone. So we took this leap. So what I started to realize is to go back in time. And I went back 100 years, and I started studying Nikola Tesla's work before anything, based on silicone technology was even introduced. And he was using electromotive components, going back to when he was working with Edison, and the understanding of dynamos and what happens when you would turn, copper windings around magnets. There's an etherical phenomenon to this day. We don't know what it is, but we call it electricity. So when we realized that two people were actually introducing electricity to the world, Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla took it to the next level, and he created alternating current, which is a man-made technology, and a lot of people don't realize that. It allowed us to transmit electricity over vast distances, and that won out over Edison's DC. Because DC is a poor traveler of energy. Now, we can understand that with the higher consciousness later. We can go back to this subject. But to look at the live stream generator and what it does is that in the messages that Nikola Tesla left us in some of his notes, and I was very fortunate to acquire those notes about 8 years ago, started to unravel the mathematics and the messages that he left in there, realized I had to go back in time and find a component that was no longer manufactured and hasn't been manufactured since the 40s. So when I started doing this, I was able to grab a hold of these devices that were literally, put away, kept in boxes for, 5 decades, 6 decades, and opening them up and then realizing how electricity is created from the source, not from plugging it into the wall or using a battery, but actually generating it yourself. So utilizing this, I was able to understand the etherical energy fields that Nikola Tesla was talking about and other researchers along the way. I definitely contribute a lot of my work to George Van Tassel, who is the creator of the Integratron, which is out in Landers, California. Now, what George Van Tassel was doing, he has a 50-foot hemisphere dome out there, and it was called a cellular rejuvenator for mankind. And he was going to generate this etherical energy with no electricity, no power lines running to it. It was going to generate its own energy from the earth. And what you would do is you would walk into this dome, and you would walk 270 degrees. You go in the entrance and walk around, take you about 45 seconds to a minute, and you would go through a recharging of the cellular system. And it would literally revitalize your human system. And you could take this pilgrimage every 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whenever you felt you needed a recharge. So he was going to give this to mankind as a gift. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack in the early 70s, and he was never able to complete it. But fortunately, the structure itself was not torn down, and it was actually one of the most key elements to me to understand how to bring this level of energy forth. And so when I went there, I knew for sure that I had the final piece. And I told the owners in 6 months I will have a prototype of how this structure was going to work. And they said, well, good luck. Many people have been saying that over the last 15 years to us, And so 6 months later, when I brought out the first prototype, which was called the Livestream Generator, they understood I was onto something. And it changed everything in regards to how we perceive energy, but the human connection to one particular level of energy that we commonly know now. Actually, we're introduced with 2 levels of technology or energy fields, which is alternating current and direct current, which is DC. Now, when we look at it, DC is the natural state of everything on the planet. Everything living has a direct current, a measurable voltage. Alternating current is man-made. There's nothing in nature that generates alternating current. We make it ourselves. So this is where it gets really interesting when we start to connect the dots after over 100 years of implementation of alternating current. So when we introduce Livestream into the human field, it brings us into a higher state of cellular activity, cellular resonance, and states of consciousness. When we move into the present moment, most people, literally I've met hundreds of people who don't really understand what the present moment is. And we've heard that around us, be in the moment. Be in the present moment. And most people don't get that. They think they are. But when we really analyze their thoughts, they're constantly thinking about something in the past or the future. So we're never really, operating from the present moment. And so many people are like that in this, and when we awaken, when we can see that, it's uncomfortable at first. But then we realize that we have the ability to bring people to a higher level of awareness, to get them to realize that there is a higher state of consciousness moving into the present moment. And that's where the magic happens in life. When we're in the present moment, you cannot fester illness in the human body. When you're in the present moment, you have homeostasis within the mind. Everything is present. Pain diminishes from your body. Stress drops off your body. And we can see this when people, master meditation. When they start introducing meditation in their lives, you can see it in their eyes, the shift after about 3 months, and how they're perceiving, and they're in a much deeper state of awareness and physical being. They move into a higher state of quality of life. So Livestream is literally a tool to assist us to remembering what we're capable of. And that's all it is. It does not cure. It is not a healing device. It is a consciousness tool that, in my guidance was to bring it forth and to share it, to the world. So this has been my mission, and it's been really amazing, and we're really working to take it to the next level globally, this year, and that's the reason why I'm getting this gift of being removed from everything that was comfortable in my life, and actually it's given me time to really look at the bigger picture.
Wow, I mean that's extraordinary, and I mean, and if your technology is based on Nikola Tesla's technology, then it's definitely extraordinary because that man right there, in my opinion, he didn't get enough recognition in the history books. I mean, I'm 49 years young, and I remember, back in my days in grade school, from kindergarten to senior year of high school, I had not heard word one about Nikola Tesla. Okay, I heard about Thomas Edison and Albert Einstein all day long. Okay, I actually did not learn of Nikola Tesla until my adult years. And then when I began to study him, and really see what he was about to a certain degree, I mean, I got very angry because I'm like, well, why isn't this man, more, why haven't we been taught about him in school? But then I realized that, his technologies and his innovations and his inventions are something that they definitely wanted to suppress because there are those out there that exploited him, and now there are those out there who are quite wealthy off of his innovations.
Very true. Well,
go ahead, my friend.
When we look at a man who was literally every time when we read a subject, it was so obvious that they say how out of time he was. He was 100 years ahead of his time. Of course, if we had Nikola Tesla here now, it would definitely be, we'd be taking this very interesting leap if he was literally allowed to do what he wanted to do. Now, most people, don't even realize that, we have about 3 of his inventions surrounding us at all times. In our homes, the induction motor, which has never changed, fluorescent lighting, neon lighting. And he was involved in over 1,200 patents. So it's kind of amazing, that most people, and he's not taught in the educational systems. They are actually trying to change that now. Is that he was the first person with George Westinghouse to create the first hydrodynamic power plant in Niagara Falls in the late 1800s. Wow. That's where the wires started wiring the world. But everyone now sees Edison attached to that name. And, most people know that Edison was adamantly against alternating current because it interfered with what he was trying to do to the world. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because Nikola Tesla, once he was recognized, he had an amazing time, but then he went deep down the rabbit hole. He went to Colorado Springs on a mountain by himself and started doing these very advanced, experiments. And what I would like to, state in regards to the levels of consciousness, he got lost, and he received such profound knowledge and awakening. It was like going to the mountain of enlightenment, and he opened himself up to those portals, and he went up to the mountain, received the enlightenment, and then was given a choice to stay up there and to bask in this enlightenment or go back down the mountain where people only look up to the mountain but have never climbed. So now when you go down and you tell people what exists, what is possible, if there's a mismatch in conscious frequency, they're not going to understand. They're going to be, of course, concerned, maybe worried, and possibly fearful. And when that happens, they usually walk away, because we cannot grasp that. We're not in that state of consciousness to be able to absorb what he is, foretelling us of what is possible. Nikola Tesla talked 100 years ago about communicating to other planets. That was before we had wireless, radio waves. So when you're talking about now, it's no big deal. We are doing that. So when we connect the dots, and he was talking about sending signals to deep space and receiving something in return, people had nothing to reference. And so they just said, whatever, and, they just stepped away from him. So when he started, to close himself up and to do this advanced work, left us incredible messages, but it was not shared. He went to a point where he didn't fit the infrastructure. He was trying to give us one of the greatest gifts, and that is what we call wireless electricity. And it was not free energy. A lot of people use that term completely out of context. You know, there's nothing free, and we could talk about that tonight, you know, so people can understand, you know, what free energy isn't. You know, it doesn't really exist. You know, of course, energy is around us, you know, in everything, and it's measurable. With our technology today, we can measure everything that's living, and it has a measurable energy field, from voltage to bioluminescence to energy, you know, and this is where it's really interesting when we start to understand that we can tap this energy once we get to this level of consciousness. We can realize at the same time when we go and stand before the Great Pyramid that something greater than us existed in regards to technology. You know, a few thousand years ago, to create a structure of such incredible accuracy, to this day, in our heightened technology and awareness, we are not able to duplicate it. So we have to kind of understand, and a lot of people have different theories about it, but there are missing links, and it's all about energy and the way that we accumulated it. So this is where it gets very interesting. When Nikola Tesla built the Wardenclyffe Tower, when he was building that with the financing from J.P. Morgan, he told everybody, now this is something that I want to clarify with most of the listeners, of understanding what most people call the controversies and the suppression of technologies. J.P. Morgan, when he was funding it, was under the assumption that it was going to be a wireless transmitter, a wireless communications transmitter to send radio waves across the world. Now, what Nikola Tesla did, he took that research and that funding a step further and kept it a secret, and wanted to do a grand experiment and give it as a gift to the world, which was going to be wireless energy. And he understood the power of the pyramid, the utilization of water, and the utilization of high voltage energy, and the earth energy, and the ionosphere, and how to turn the world into a dynamo, and we would create a polarity. And we'd be able to, like an air capacitor, receive that energy etherically, and we would just need simple conversion tools to utilize it. And he was doing this in Colorado Springs. There's plenty of research showing that he took light bulbs and once he turned on his radiant energy generators up there, he could take light bulbs and place them on the ground, and they would light up with no wires.
Wow.
You know, and the stories that happened in Colorado Springs before he got it just right. There's many stories talking about when Nikola Tesla was doing his research. You had to stay away from the fire hydrants and stuff like that, because they would literally jump out where 3 or 4 foot arcs of energy would jump and hit you if you got close to them. And people would look at the grass at night, and they would have this coronal glow for acres. They'd see this blue glow. When he was doing his research. Once he got it finely tuned, none of that happened, and it was amazing what he was able to do. But going back to the Wardenclyffe Tower, the funding, he was getting to the budget that Morgan wanted to spend on this, and when he was stopped, that's when he confessed, and he said, "This is a great gift, and I want to give it to the world." And most people think that J.P. Morgan stopped it because he didn't know how to charge people for it. So the conversation was too brief, and the funding just stopped. And there were many reasons for that. But when we understand when inventors want to give a great gift of that level and that much power to the people who were literally in their infancy of understanding how to harness energy, that future, we could have done more harm than good on this planet. And this is where we have to realize it. Yeah, it's really hard for people to connect the dots, because when we see traces of advanced civilizations and they were gone, we look at Atlantis, we look at the myths of Lemuria. Atlantis supposedly harnessed great energies, but in that level of consciousness, they destroyed themselves. So we have to realize with great power comes great responsibility.
I see. So now, basically, I mean, you've certainly given me a whole new perspective on this, John. Because up until now, I thought that much of what Nikola Tesla did was suppressed because he threatened the structure. But now that you explained it in the way that you did, that, well, wait a minute, maybe we did need to, maybe they did need to pull in the reins on him a little bit, because, like you said, had he given that to the world and it been widely accepted, then, we might have gone crazy and destroyed ourselves. So yeah,
Well,
I must
absolutely.
admit, you've given me a whole new, a whole new way of thinking on that.
Yes, well,
And
that pondering, we really have to look back and ponder and realize, because when we look at what the world could have been, and of course when we look at, just the discoveries in the last 100 years, and we literally had, we had the power to obliterate ourselves. And so many of the advanced technologies of tapping the atom and tapping the hydrogen, the power of hydrogen, most of the scientists behind those, thought, well, this could create a chain reaction and literally scorch our atmosphere. But they did it anyway. So we have to kind of look at that, how close we got, to, creating so much power. We really could have reset ourselves, and we would have had to do a start over. And the humans, we do have the ability, and we know it. We have the technology now to literally create an extinction level event if we are not conscious, and we're realizing we're right at this brink of conscious shift. And this is where we have to really understand, the power that and the responsibility at this point in time. So this is where it gets really interesting. So 100 years ago, if we would have jumped into this limitless power source, that could have been, a very different scenario to this day if we would have made that one, if he was able to turn that switch on.
Wow, interesting. I mean, and what you're saying is absolutely correct too. Because I mean, look at the type of energy they have out there now. What they're building. With the military. All the nuclear weaponry. And things of that nature. And
Yes.
When just as you said, a few minutes ago, I've always asked myself that question. Well, if the people that are creating these things know what it can do, then why are you creating it? I mean, that to me, that's the $1 million question. I mean, these scientists that are building these nuclear warheads, that a nuclear warhead can do widespread damage. So now, why are you creating it? I mean, do you plan on using this thing at some point? I mean, what's going on here?
Well, let's the simple answer to that question. You say, why are you building it? It's a very profound answer. Because we can. Yeah.
Exactly. But like you said, I just hope it doesn't come back to bite us in our hindquarters, because like you said, one of the things that we have as human beings, we have the capability of self-destruction. And we have to realize that. But before we go any further, John, we have a quick question from the chat room. A very good question. And speaking of the live stream generator, the question reads: is there a difference between the radiant pulse boxes and the live stream generator?
The radiant pulse boxes, that's another technology?
I believe so.
I'm not familiar with that, actually.
Okay.
I would need more information, because there are other technologies out there, that work with what we call, Rife technologies. And, I haven't really come across anybody else that was actually working with true radiant energy fields. I researched a lot of technologies over the years to, understand what directions people were taking. And, a lot of it, when we looked at George Lakhovsky, he was working with the multi-wave oscillators. And a lot of people know Royal Raymond Rife. and his understanding of using particular frequencies to combat cancer cells. Now this is really interesting in the research. What I was looking at Rife and looking at Lakovsky, and they were all based on Nikola Tesla's research. Nikola Tesla planted the seed, and this is where it gets very interesting. So the multi-wave oscillator used, harmonic frequencies using a high voltage, state, and then using sacred geometry or these concentric rings to generate different harmonic energy fields. Now, this was interesting. Now we look at what Raymond Rife was doing. He was dialing frequencies and finding the cause, the effect, and then the way to either get a cell to reset itself, go back into homeostasis, or eradicate it. So when you look at the Rife technologies, there was this gamut of frequencies that you can dial. Everything from the RF amplification technologies to the radionics technologies. It came with big books of different, you had to dial 5 different dials to different frequencies. And this is what I started to understand. It's like, wait a second. They're trying to find particular frequencies. What humans do now, we utilize different frequencies for our technologies, like our cell phones, like our radio waves, and we can look at that in so many different ways. Now, what are we doing is that we're taking certain spectrums out of the unified field, and that's the etherical binding energy of everything that exists. We have the ability to harness and to amplify certain radio frequencies, through this unified field spectrum. Now, what do? We amplify them 100,000 times, 1,000,000 times amplified past the natural etherical unified binding energy that's around us. So what happens when we do this? We induce ourselves, our human structures, with one particular frequency, and we bombard it. Now, our human systems have the ability to calibrate. We're multi-oscillating. We go through, possibly 150,000 shifts in our cellular frequency daily, just based on our thoughts. But then we have a hard time seeing because we live in a 3D illusion, and we don't see everything that's around us. Because if we did, we'd see the radio frequencies coming from our cell phones as we look at them. But we don't. Those are hidden from us for a reason, not because of a conspiracy, because they would be very unpleasant for us to see. They would interfere with the three-dimensional realization that we have the ability to see, the spectrum of the rainbow. Now, when we look at the human, what's happening to us right now, a lot of people think when you turn the radio on, that's when the radio frequencies come in, and that's when you can receive it. That's not the case. That FM, those XM satellite radio frequencies are hitting us as we speak. They're hitting the car, they're hitting us, they're hitting everything around us. And we have to realize that. Same thing with our cell phones. They're transmitting and they're receiving. And everyone in a 3-mile radius, we're part of their broadcast. So this is where it gets really interesting. The human system constantly is rebalancing itself with all these energies that are hitting us, as satellites in space, bombarding us as we speak. So this is, now we can always compensate this unless we get too much of something. This is what we call too much of something, and we see those effects in the research, is when we're overexposed to certain things. Then the body cannot compensate itself, and that's when we start to see imbalances. We get to see mutations in the cellular structure. Thus, those are called diseases. So that's called stress. We can mentally induce stress, or we can environmentally or physically induce stress into our human systems. So this is where it gets very interesting when we start to open up our consciousness and realize, wait a minute, I'm surrounded by all these energy fields that are taken out of unification and amplified because of man's technology and conscious utilization to make our lives better. But then now we're coming into this awareness that sometimes this might not be a good thing. And this is where we, in the last 20 years, 30 years, we've seen this consortium of safety, which has engineers, doctors, scientists on these boards that regulate what is tolerable within the human system. What level of exposures, and that's how cell phones radically got reduced, when we understand what a cellular, phone is. Back in the 80s, they were bricks putting out 4 watts of high power energy, because the towers were 15 miles apart. Now we have cell sites everywhere, and that's the reason why we can have what we call microwatt, technology at our head, is because they immediately realized that we have to change this quickly because the human system cannot tolerate this much bombardment of one particular radio frequency at such a high level. It will cause damage. So we shifted that technology very quickly, and most people didn't realize how advanced we became so quickly in regards to cellular phone technology, because we had to.
I see. Now, I noticed within the last several years, John, quantum physics and zero-point research, have been bandied about. Quantum physics, zero-point research. Is there a similarity? Well, 2 questions here. What exactly is zero-point research, and is there any correlation between zero-point research and quantum physics?
Well, actually, I think we coined the phrase the 0 point from quantum exploration, and we started to look beyond ourselves in a quantified bigger picture. And this is where we started to understand there's more energy in the vacuum of space than there is mass. And this is what we had to start to understand, is that if we had that ability to harness the unseen energy forces. We are doing that now. And most people, when we come into that awareness, they don't even know what electricity is. We just utilize it. And this is where it gets very interesting. But how it's generated is still, to this day, a phenomenon. So when we understand, and if you look it up, if anyone goes into the dictionaries, goes online, looks up, electricity, and what it is, it will say that there is an etherical phenomenon when rotational fields are introduced from rotational coils, copper coils, and magnets. There is an effect that happens, and they call it the movement of electrons. But the stem of it, what happens when we start to move these two in close proximity, that's when the magic happens. That's where this torus, or this etherical energy field, is induced. And it can be generated anywhere that we are on this planet, in the magnetosphere. The Earth, because we're tapping the etherical energy of the Earth. The Earth is constantly generating energy. It is a life force, and it allows us to utilize it. So this is where it gets interesting, is understanding energy itself. Most people, they don't realize that right now 2,000 lightning storms are happening on this planet as we speak. If you go online on YouTube and you look at the International Space Station and how they do these rotations across the Earth, look when they're going over in the dark. You'll see chaos in the atmosphere and all these lightning storms happening all over the place. And this is what's very interesting. Then when we reflect inwards, we don't realize that there's 2,000 pulses of electricity running through our synaptics and our nerves in our brain, sending conscious and unconscious energy pulses throughout our systems, allowing us to breathe, allowing us to think, allowing us to see, hear, and smell, all from the subconscious aspect where we don't have to task ourselves. It happens naturally. But there's 2,000 pulses happening simultaneously every second, sending data throughout our bodies. Same thing that's happening on the planet. Now, if the pulses from the lightning storm cease, within a matter of hours, life on this planet would cease to exist.
Really?
The same thing that would happen. Oh, yeah, absolutely. If the lightning storm stopped, that electrical, charge of the dynamo of the planet, of the magnetosphere, ceased. All life would cease with it. Same thing that happens if the 2,000 pulses of lightning, pulses stopped functioning in our brains, we would cease to be as we know ourselves.
Interesting. Very,
it becomes very interesting when we start connecting the dots, as above, so below. And now we have bigger eyes. We're out in space. We can see the energy that happens from a much bigger picture. Everything from the sprites, like the multi-tiered lightning storms that happen, that go out hundreds of miles, outside of what we originally thought 10 years ago. We thought it was within our ionosphere, but no, it goes out the stratosphere and into space. So this is where it gets kind of fascinating. When you can look up those, you can look up sprite lightning, different levels of lightning, and it's amazing, what we're discovering or realizing today. Now, and there was about a month ago when we had that huge particle storm that came from the sun, and it was great because NASA realized we got bombarded for 3 days. And if you go back and look at it, the satellites that were monitoring the sun got bombarded for 3 days. They were literally in a particle storm. You couldn't even see anything. All of these satellites had to go into safety mode because we never saw anything like this before. So when it hit our planet in the northern hemisphere, it charged and created amazing coronas. But it did so much more than that. It shifted what we call the ground currents of the planet, and that is where energy is based from. So that's the reason why we're seeing over voltages and transformers blowing out in different cities, the grids being affected by these particle storms, because the ground current changes. The voltage within the Earth itself shifts when these particle storms happen. But what NASA released during that time is they said with all that energy that hit the planet in those 2 days, if we had the ability to harness that energy, we could power the city of New York City for 6 months.
Wow.
Just for 2 days of what the sun sent us. Now, what's beautiful about that is that they're thinking like that now. Is that if we could harness energy outside of what we're doing now, it would solve all our issues. My mind sometimes goes way out there when I'm in think tanks talking, because I do hire myself out and I work with companies, to get them outside of their box and to bring in the new paradigm of thinking. And so I work with these global think tanks, and when we're talking about the next level of fuels, biofuels, algae, and the next generation electric cars or different ways of harnessing electricity, is we have to go outside ourselves. And sometimes it takes a while because they're saying, well, we can only do it this way. This is the only way that we know. This is the only efficiency, that we know. And I'm like, well, you have to re-educate yourself, and because you're limited by what you've been told. And if you want to come with me, let's go to Egypt, and I'll make you scratch your heads and understand what type of energy they accumulated to do these things in such precision that's still beyond us today. So this is where we have the ability to change people's way of thinking and to bring in new technologies, for our future. So we're at the stem. We're right at the precipice of this great conscious shift on the planet. And our technologies are really about to take a giant leap because the limiters that have been holding us in place are no longer able to do that. And we've seen that on so many levels. We can talk about that. How it's just changed. Just our binds. And we realized that less than half a century ago when it was impossible to break the speed of sound, and everyone believed it was impossible. But guess what happened? Someone did it, and within a few decades, we broke the atmosphere of space in a short period of time. We look how fast we've progressed, and this is where it gets really amazing. But it was impossible for us in one way of thinking until someone did it and shifted consciousness across the planet. So this is where we're at again. We see a lot of this information that came from CERN. Of course, there's a lot of mixed reports coming out of the big particle collider, and and the same thing is with the mysteries of what's happening from the sun, how it's like changing what we perceive the laws of physics to be. So scientists are scratching their heads all over the world, not just in the U.S.
Wow. This is really, and we also, have a request from the chat room as well. They're very much interested in the Oculus pendants, the amulets that you make as well. And what I find interesting is that the name of the pendulums, Oculus, it has like the first 4 letters of Occult.
Yes, well, when we look at the Oculus, it's very interesting how those came to be. My first journey into Egypt, I was guided to go to the Valley of the Kings, and I went up into one of the tombs of one of the pharaohs, and it was very interesting because I climbed to the top, and I left my group, I climbed to the top, and I was guided to go into one, and the guardian in there came. He was down below, and he walked all the way up, and he said something to me, and I just nodded to him, and he smiled, looked me in the eyes, and then he left. And they never leave you alone. He left for 40 minutes. And I was in it completely by myself. And I literally read the Book of the Dead that's on the wall, completely intact, and I just absorbed this knowledge. I had no interference. It was just me, in this tomb. And I literally made sure I took in everything that was on the walls. And when I left there, that tomb, I was guided to bring elements of the earth back. And that was the white alabaster that is only found in Egypt, the calcite, and the water from the Osirion in Abydos, Egypt, which to this day is still a mystery where it comes from. Most of the Egyptologists will tell you it's Nile seepage, but it's not. It comes from an aquifer buried very deep in the earth. And I actually call that water core of the earth water. It has a centuries-old original memory. And when we start to understand how water holds the strongest memory, we can talk about this, this understanding later. So with picking up those two elements, I was also guided to bring back blue lotus oil. And, you can go to the perfumeries there and get this pressed lotus oil, and that wasn't working for me. I said, no, this isn't it. I need generations. I need the ancient understanding. And I stumbled upon someone who actually it took me, a couple of years, but the first year was amazing. I found the right family that did the oil pressings for generations. And they literally had the ancient recipes or the ancient alchemies that the pharaohs used to use. And they used to press what they called generations oils. Now, what would happen is that they would take, when they were growing the blue lotuses, every year where they did the annual pressings, they would have these vessels in the earth. And they would literally, once a year, they would unseal these vessels, take the decanter filled full of that year's press oils and pour it in, and then cap it and reseal it, and then bury it back in the earth. So some of these oils were literally hundreds of years old, just incubating in the earth. And a lot of alchemists today use that method when they're making things. And there's actually a brother that his name is Baratunde with, I think it's called Forgotten Foods is the name of his company. And him and I, if you know him, he's great. He uses the ancient understandings. He buries his stuff in the earth, for several years until it's ready, when it says it's ready to come out. But they would do it for hundreds of years. And the pharaohs would get anointed by these 500, 1,000-year-old oils. And it would completely send your cell structure beyond anything that we can talk about today. So fortunately, I stumbled upon one of the old families, and I talked to, and he said, I'll come back tomorrow. And then he said, I went out there, and then they talked about the great-grandfather who used to do this. They scoured the land. They found these 3 vessels, and one of them was blue lotus oil. And the last date that it was open was 35 years ago, and the first date was 185 years before that. And so they opened it up for the first time in 35 years. They had no idea until I went out there and reminded them about this process. And they unearthed it, and they found literally about 16 ounces of this 185-year-old blue lotus at the bottom of this clay pot. And they extracted it, and they gave me about 12 ounces of it. And they kept it, of course they sold it to me, but they were blown away that it even existed. I mean, they had tears in their eyes when they handed it to me. They said, you reminded us of something that we've forgotten. So it was such a beautiful experience to come back with 185-year-old blue lotus oil, and it's not clear at all. The 1-year-old stuff is like it's clear with a light blue hue. This stuff was indigo. It was like a phenomenon. You look into it, you gaze into it, and the color was it was like this pure indigo. And you put it on your skin, and it would be blue, but then within seconds it would completely disappear. It was a phenomenon. It was an illusion. the spectrum itself, and it doesn't stain anything. It's literally pure blue lotus. So when we bring it into our cells and then we inhale it, some people have some profound images that come, and they feel this vibration through their whole cellular system. It's like this massive activation. So that is part of the ingredients of the Oculus, with the white alabaster, with the water, with the gold, with 24-karat gold, and the algae in the water from the Osirion is a living life force. So that is a living mechanism that holds that energy, that memory of the water constantly. So the algae doesn't, it's a life force generator. So combined with our life force field, I didn't know exactly what the Oculuses were. When I made them, I looked at it, and it said Oculus. And I said, Oculus. And I just kept saying it, and I looked it up, and the closest explanation was Latin for lens. So it's literally like a looking glass. And so when it was very interesting, I was guided to make 12 of them, and I gave them to 12 people very close to me. And I said, if you can do this for me, if you could wear it for a minimum of at least 3 days so it integrates into your field, but most importantly, sleep with it. And they all agreed to do this. And literally the next day, I started getting phone calls from them. And one close friend of mine, he says, I don't know what this is, but when I woke up and found out that I was dreaming, I started to cry. He said, I wanted to go back there so bad. He goes, what is this? And I said, you were telling me. And so after I got about 10 people responded out of the 12, and that's when I realized that it was a lens to the higher knowing, a lens to the super consciousness when we go into sleep states. And it allows us to, to unfold the dream realm into a higher level of clarity. So this is very fascinating. I've been making them since 2007, and it's just been really amazing. The stories that people to this day, still tell me. They're all hands-on. They're done by me with the highest intention. They're not mass-produced in any way. So it's a very sacred process when I make each Oculus. I have to be in the right state of mind. So, yeah.
Wow. But, tell us about, the medicine, the Siddha medicine that,
oh, boy.
from India. That sounds extremely interesting.
Well, yeah, interesting is indeed the word to use. Well, to explain that is to go back almost a year ago today when I did my presentation. I stated, like when I first introduced about my journey to India, my quote was, I had absolutely no interest in India until India had an interest in me. And so what that did, literally about a year and a half ago, a bugle went off in my energetic field after going to Egypt 4 times and in 3 years. And unlocking and bringing energy devices and working with the grids out there, all of a sudden it was time to go to India. And what happened is that 2 dear friends that became friends were messengers from the 19th Siddha. Now, what is a Siddha? Most people might want to know is that they are beings that are us that have reached a higher state of consciousness. But they also they go through a transmutation in their physical beings. Now, the 19th Siddha, his name is Ananda Siddha, and he was a very pious person in India, very rich and successful person. And about 9.5 years ago, he would take a lot of his wealth and he would restore many of the temples in South India. South India is a vortex. It's a massive hotspot. Untouched for thousands of years. There's no distortions in the energy fields there. So when Siddha was doing this work, about 9.5 years ago, he was laying in his bed and Shiva appeared before him and granted him this great boon to live 500 years. And he was to build this temple. He was to release all his physical wealth, his businesses. He had if I recall, a very successful software company. He was very, very, very rich man, and he had to release all of that. And everything that he owned, he had to release it. And he had to go to the mountain of Mahadevamalai, which is Shiva's mountain, which is known in history that Shiva dwelled in this cave on top of this mountain. And once he did this, he released everything except for the bed that Shiva sat on and told him all this. Because he did not want to release that, because Shiva came to him and sat on the bed and talked to him for hours. Now, what we understand from the spiritual aspect of it, but let's look at it from a science aspect. When we understand, because I look at everything from almost all aspects, if an ascended being literally opens up a portal and comes through, another dimension and chooses to hold the physical body, so we can relate. What's happening in that moment is the amount of energy that they are tapping from that 0-point field. If we are in proximity of that, we are going to go through what we call a cellular transfiguration. We will never be the same, because we are before an ascended being that is portaling into our dimension to send us a message. So we are immediately going to not be the same. It's like being struck by lightning, 100,000 times over, because your consciousness shifts. You are now in between understandings of reality. So what happened with Siddha is that Shiva told him, you will no longer eat food, you will no longer drink water, you will only wear one piece of clothing, you will not bathe except for once a year. And you will receive your prana from fire. So every morning, Siddha, they stoke this huge fire up on top of the temple, and he stands or lays in it, and he does not burn. His clothes don't burn. His hair doesn't burn. He performs a miracle every day. So he immediately bends what we perceive as possible. Now, he was also guided to go to the top of the mountain and to build this temple. And he didn't understand that. But when he arrived, Shiva appeared to him again, gave him the vision of this temple that is to last 500 years. So right now, if you go up there, or if you look it up, 19th Siddha, and you will see his temple that is under construction. It's 7 levels, and it is using current technology, but he takes what are specifications of building codes and doubles it. So most of the foundations made out of cement and rebar would be 6 to 8 inches thick. His floors are like 2 feet thick. Literally meant to last 500 years, not to deteriorate over the years. And but what's really amazing, because he does not sleep, he does not eat, he does not drink. None of his organs work the way that ours do, because he receives his prana from fire. He runs crews days and nights. And what's really amazing about it is that there are no blueprints. There are no drawings. He walks up to each individual person and transmits what they're going to do, either by speaking in Tamil, which is the ancient language, or they just see it in their minds, what they're going to do that day. So this is what's going on in India. And it's absolutely fascinating when you climb the mountain and go before Siddha.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and, we don't have much time to really delve into it, but what's happening is that what Siddha is doing, a lot of people are kind of conflicted, with these beings, and one of the things that Siddha wants us all to know is that he is not a master, he is not a teacher. He is only here to remind us of what we're capable of or what we have forgotten. And he constantly reminds us, remember, I was once like you. So this is where it's very profound. He didn't come off of a mountain. He was literally amongst the people when he went through this transmutation, received this boon that Shiva chose him for because of his pious, his dedication, to rebuilding the temples and the sacred structures around India. So it's really amazing what is going on, in India. And of course, when my friends Ganga and Tara, when they actually came out, they were actually chosen by Siddha. They said when they met Siddha, they looked at them and said, you're going to be my messenger. You're going to take me to the West. You're going to be my messengers of the West. And they're like, what? How are we going to get you on a plane? And they didn't understand it first. Then they started to realize, oh, we are going to share this knowledge to Westerners. We're going to go back to the Americas, and we're going to share this knowledge because this is what Siddha wants us to do. And so this is how I found out. This is how I got the call, is I found out that this event was taking place called The Secret of the Siddhas, and all of a sudden I just had to be there. I didn't know why. It just called me. And literally when I walked in the room, I sat down, they started to present this information. Then the picture of Siddha came up, and it just blew me wide open, and it was like a bugle. And I'm like, what is going on? I just completely, went with it, and I, opened my home for them to host, and we filled the place with about 45 people, and they shared the messages again, and that's when it was so clear that I was to go back to India and to stand before Siddha and be one of the messengers to bring back this understanding of what is happening on the planet. So yes, that's how it started, and then through the continuing connections, I think the information was presented to about 3,000 people. Nearly a year, they traveled across the United States, and it was a really amazing journey. They literally came here with less than $100. They were kind of worried, how are they going to do this? Siddha said, let it unfold as it comes, and literally every day it just opened up to them. And it's just amazing what how they went through, I think about 40 states of the 50 states, drove through, presented all over the United States, and shared it to over 3,000 people. And I think 3 people to this time actually went before Siddha. And it's really interesting. So 3 of us came back, with this knowledge that Siddha, exchanged with us, to integrate into the West at this proclaimed time in history, part of a prophecy. So at the same time, there's more and more happening that allowed, where we've been getting information about the Kaya Kalpa. And there's, in history, if you read some of the books, one of the most popular one is talked about Apostasy. And he took the Kaya Kalpa, if I recall, 3 times in his life. And he was about 80 when he received it for the first time. And he went to this one ashram, and he went into a room, and for 61 days, if I recall, in complete darkness. And he took the Siddha herbs, which is the Kaya Kalpa, and cow's milk, and that's all he did for 61 days in absolute darkness. He ate the Siddha herbs and drank the cow's milk. Someone would give this to him every day. And what happens through this process is that you go through an inverted regeneration process. You literally shed your skin, all your hair falls out, all your teeth fall out, and you grow new hair, you grow new teeth. And when he came out, he was about 45 years younger.
Really?
Yeah, so he's known to have lived approximately 235 years, if I'm correct. And he looked younger than I do today. So these are the regenerations, and this is known in the ancient, in India. This knowledge is there, but it's been kept there for thousands of years. It hasn't really, leaked out into the West until recently. And this is where it gets very interesting. So now there is an old man that is connected to Siddha, known as Papa, and he is making these herbs, and he is making different structures of these herbs. Now, the first one that came to the West was called Navapashana. Now, that's the first level of the rejuvenation herbs that the Siddhas make. And this is what's fascinating, only one person on the planet at each time has the alchemy to make the Navapashana. It's handed down etherically to the next person. It's not taught like we are. It's something. It's given to you, and you just know. And then you go and you make it. But, then Papa, he's been in the forest, and no one knows where he lives. He comes out when it's time, and he connects with people. And he brought the Navapashana out like a little over a year and a half ago, and that's been being distributed. And that is the first level. They take these herbs. They're just natural herbs that grow on trees and bushes, and they have an ability to change the structure of it and turn it into these beads that are literally harder than granite. So they're actually creating this new element. You know, and it's an absolute mystery when you hold this stuff and you feel the frequency and the vibration on it. But when you dip it in water, that's when the magic happens. The water immediately shifts to the memory of this Navapashana. And I do a lot of advanced water research. I mean, I've been working on even, technologies, that, we can utilize water as energy, turn, water into fire instantaneously. So things like this. But then when we understand the influence of water and the liquidic state, but the memory and the mystery of it, when Navapashana is introduced to it, it almost becomes an absolute. It cannot be changed once Navapashana is introduced to water. And I can induce, different frequencies in the water, but I cannot change Navapashana water. And I was very intrigued by that. So when we start ingesting this water, it works, from the inside out. It starts to rejuvenate us on a very slow basis based on what we as Westerners could adapt to. None of us have the lifestyle to be able to go into the dark for 61 days, rejuvenate ourselves by 40 years, and then go back into our normal life. People are going to look at you and go, that's not you. And if it is, you're going to be considered, an oddity. And people are going to want to try to figure out what you did. So who wants to be the first one to do that? Raise your hand. Rejuvenate 40 years. I mean, if you're 60, you're going to look like you're about 25. So how's that going to work in your life? And this is the whole thing. This is where it's tricky. Most people don't give it that much thought. They don't give immortality much thought either. We really have to start pondering, is it really a gift or is immortality a curse? Because if you're the only one that's immortal, you're going to watch everyone you love die before you. And then more people that you fall in love, you're going to watch them die. So this is where it gets really tricky. How long do you really want to live?
True.
So when all this, I know this definitely makes us ponder. So when we look at what's happening with the first level Kayakalpa, it has literally been honed for us as an experiment, and it's such a blessing. There were 39 people chosen to receive this first batch of Siddha herbs, and one of our dear friends went before Siddha, who then brought him before Papa, who is actually, and Papa is the old man in the jungle that makes the herbs. And many people believe that he is the reincarnated Bogar, and Bogar lived over 3,000 years ago. So this is where it gets very interesting, is what's going on that level. So, just the honor of 39 of us got together to receive the first level of these Siddha herbs. And there's 4 stages, and it's 4 months. And every day we ingest the herbs. They're under pill forms, that they created them, and they put them in different capsules. But the energy of them is really amazing. If you go to my Facebook page under John D. Riley, there's a picture with me holding a bag of the herbs with a very dear friend of mine, Steve Ross. And there's an energy between us both that, was taken from an iPhone camera. But the energy in the photo cannot, be denied. I'm still trying to decipher it myself that the iPhone actually picked this up. But the energy in that room is very powerful when the herbs were distributed to us.
Wow, this is this is awe-inspiring, and it's really refreshing to hear this type of information, being that we're in 2012, because when we talk about 2012, we have 2 camps here. We have the camp that believes that this is going to be the Great Awakening. This is where, the pendulum is going to shift, from all the gook to the good stuff. But then we also have the other camp that's thinking that, okay, this is where the earth is going to open up and swallow us all, and we're all going to be done. What are your thoughts and opinions on 2012, John?
Well, looking at us being 4 months, 4.5 months into the 2012 understanding, one of the things is that we can look at and what is happening is that it's without a doubt we're seeing a consciousness shift on the planet. And we're seeing it from all aspects, from the lower frequencies to the higher frequencies. The higher ones usually don't make it on the news media. That usually happens within our own networks of soul family and friends. And but what we see just happening in the planet is that all these subversion, all these psychological tactics to subdue the masses are now being revealed. And this is something that we started seeing last year, in Egypt, and how it started in Egypt, but the people just said no more. And they would not run away from fear and from these terrorist tactics. They became stronger in numbers. And we started to realize that, the people are waking up. And the first level of waking up is that you will no longer stay within fear. You will rise above it. And once you're above it in the harmonic aspects of the human existence, you have to go below to try to go back into fear. And most people won't take that choice once they rise above, because you're on the next plateau, and then you're realizing you can see better up here. You have a bigger picture and a higher understanding of how things operate. So why would you go back down? Why would you go back into the basement where you're confined to four walls?
That's true.
So when we start seeing that happen on the human frequency, we realize the shift is already happening. We will see the mechanisms that have been in play for a long time still try to do their best to subdue, but all that's going to do is make the masses stronger, because those lower frequencies, people are going, we will not have this anymore. When I was out there in Egypt in November during the elections, the news on CNN and all the other stations, Al Jazeera, they only kept showing that one act of the incident of the cars being on fire and people running and the bodies being drug off. And what I noticed is that they were literally programming people to be fearful of that moment. They would show some live, but then they'd repeat that over and over again for 2 days, 3 days straight, until people only saw that image over and over and over again. That was literally 7 minutes of several days. But what most people didn't realize is that everyone was peaceful in the square. We were out there when it all turned, and you could feel the energy change. But what was really interesting is that when one person died, 10,000 more people arrived. When another person died, another 10,000 people arrived, until there were literally over 1 million people in that square. Based from 10 deaths. Now, when we see that, it wasn't people leaving; it was people coming. And this is where we have to start looking at it. What would cause that to happen? People are saying no more. They will not run away because they see death on the TV or heard someone die. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This is where we see that resonance frequencies of the planet are going through a shift. Now, most people don't understand that from the bigger picture. I do. I go to Egypt and I measure the fields, the grids where all the temples are every time I go, and we have tangible evidence. There are literally a couple of the temples that are so active now you can feel the energy with your hands. It's like liquidic energy. You move your hand and it's like all of a sudden you're hitting this energy bubble. They're only in certain areas, but without a doubt you can feel it. And so and I'm showing people, I said, this is like maybe 1% of what was really going on back here. But we are returning to this arc, in the universe and aligning to these galactic streams of energy that the Earth has not been in for thousands of years. And this is where it gets really interesting. Now we can realize that the old technologies that once built these ancient kingdoms are returning, and with that comes the consciousness to understand how to harness and how to utilize them. And a lot of people look at the places that are ancient on this planet, and they will theorize, but none of them have actual proof of how they were built. So I take little technologies out and I start working with some of the elements that the Egyptians or the builders of these ancient structures, knew. And when you start combining these materials, what happens with energy? And using live stream, there is one on my YouTube page, which is Consciousstreams, all one word. It's actually live stream and the connection in Egypt, where I took a very small device and I brought it to one of the families that lives, right outside, the pyramid fields. one of the best views, in Egypt, when you go on their roof, and when I brought that in and we started doing different experiments with different materials, but also what happens when you introduce the human element and what happens with the human system and the human intention, it changes everything. We're getting closer to understand how they were able to levitate, 200-ton boulders, but more or less, the energy fields to cut them in absolute precision, within a micron variance, within themselves. We're still not able to do that, even with our sophisticated lasers, to cut through granite so perfectly, to cut through basalt so perfectly and so accurately. There's so many things that if you look down, it blow you away. Most people, the first time they go to Egypt, they look up and they're in awe. But there's so much more that is below our feet. And that's what I got introduced on my last journey, and it blew me away. What's down below that hardly anyone even knows exists. The Egyptian government, they just locked it up and walked away from it because it's old kingdom, and it's the oldest, but it's the most sophisticated. And this is in every kingdom, after it degraded. They started losing information. So this is where it's very interesting. The older the structures are, the more sophisticated they were. So what happened? What arc happened on this planet? And I theorized that it was the energy fields. We are not able to harness energies that once existed. We were too far away from them, and now we're returning to them. It's almost like if you had a cell phone and it worked, and then you drove 300 miles, out into the Australian outback, it would cease to function and communicate. The other functions would work, and if you stay out there long enough, you would even forget how the technology worked in the first place. You would just utilize it for what it does now. But now you start to return to where the towers are transmitting the signals, and now the technology starts to function again, but we don't understand what it's doing until we start getting closer and we realize, wait a minute, this is a communication tool. This is a different frequency now that this device is picking up. The closer I get to this transmitter, the more functional it becomes. That is this planet in this grand scheme of the universe, and what the Mayans and this 26,000-year journey and this alignment that is happening on the planet, and these energies that are going to be returning. It's the game changer. It's the conscious game changer.
Wow.
And there's proof. We can take live streams that are built. I got this little one that I put in a backpack and I can take anywhere, with me, and it's battery powered, and it's amazing what this little thing will do. And I have pictures, and understanding the measuring fields when we literally open up what we call portal energies, and we understand what the Egyptians, how they built these temples on, these ley lines of the planet. And each holiest of holies in the temple, in each of the temple sites, the holiest of holies chamber is the crossing of those two grids. That is where the power vortex of the planet will amplify the highest level of energy. So using certain elements, earth elements, they're accumulators, just like we do today with our limited knowledge of how we use capacitors or batteries to store energy. We use rudimentary understandings. The Egyptians knew bigger ways of harnessing energy. And this is where it gets very interesting, because you got to remember, we set our parameters within our consciousness of how to convert energy to utilize certain levels of technology for our convenience. So now when we're talking about 0 point, we can harness 0 point at any time. The hardest part is the conversion, to convert it to utilize what we are doing now with our technologies. You kind of get that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's fascinating and frightening at the same time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and, listening to you, really teach about it, I'm sitting here and I'm really imagining it like, this is fascinating, but at the same time, it's also frightening as well because, man, the things that we do on this planet, we tend to not only utilize these energies to create good things, but going back to what we were speaking about earlier, we tend to, also want to sit down and figure out, well, how could we use it in a destructive way?
Yes.
And we're going to take a quick pause, John, because we have a question from a listener on the switchboard. So we're just going to take a peek at the switchboard to see if anyone has any questions. We have a caller from the 516 area code. Caller, if you're there, please state your name and where you're calling from.
I'm calling from New York. This is Quentin, John.
Quentin, my brother, how are you?
I'm good, brother. It's so good to hear your voice.
Good to hear yours, my friend.
I just wanted to say I'm so proud of you, man, and to tell the people that I've known you for many years, and this man has been an integral part in my spiritual awareness just by being around him and listening to him and having him as a friend for all these years, man. And so I am so glad that you're giving, I've touched this energy that you have been sharing with so many people. So I know firsthand the things that it can awaken in everyone, and I'm just so proud of you, bro.
Oh man, you know how much I love you. I can't wait to share a space with you once again. And I know
we will.
Coming soon.
Yes, definitely. And have a continued great show, man. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you so much.
You got it,
Thank
bro.
you for calling in, brother. Very excellent commentary. Peace and blessings to you. Okay, and getting back now, what I really found really interesting, in one of our private conversations, you were talking about, how you had traveled to 5 countries, but now when you return to the States, you return to a state of homelessness, and you see that as a gift. Now when we look at homelessness in the conventional way, it's something that's not nice, but then when I heard you explain it, I was like, well, wow, I really would like him to share this with the family. So please expound on that, brother.
Well, to expand on it is, when I do see it as a great gift, and the reason why I do is because, when I realized that I was in a level of comforts, and sometimes I call it the uncomfortable comforts. We are uncomfortable, but we're comfortable at the same time, and we're not really ready to shift out of that uncomfortableness because it's comfortable. Know what I mean?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So in that aspect is all the seeds that I planted last year, right after Japan had the disasters with the earthquake and the tsunami and then the nuclear meltdown, I put together a humanitarian project, and that was a big awakening for me, was to build one of my most powerful technologies and to bring it out there, to plant a seed and to give it to the people. And so I did that. It was about a $25,000 expense. I thought nothing of it. And, I put it out there, and, there were so many wonderful people who helped donate to the cause. So about 10% of that came in, and I was just grateful that, people understood what I was passionately willing to do. And so many people said, you're going to go out there? There's all that radiation and all that. I said, if this is about the now. I said, there's no fear, is that I understand if I'm putting myself, to the test, I'm putting the technology to the test, is that I am to bring this technology to help people with this issue, with the radiation. And if everything within me is correct, they will realize that this technology is going to help people on so many levels. So when I did it, it was kind of a mystery. There's about 110 people that showed up for this beautiful ceremony. And when I presented the technology, I did some really wonderful demonstrations. We had to have a translator there because, everyone spoke Japanese. And once I planted that seed, then I left. And what was very interesting is that when I returned months later to do a presentation, because they were very intrigued by the effects of it, and they wanted to know more, I said, well, I'll come out and I'll do demonstrations for the doctors, anybody that wants to. So I went out there for a few days, and I asked, where the technology was. And they said, oh, it's downstairs in a closet. And I just kind of looked, and I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I said, wow, that's interesting. I said, I gave that to the gift of the people, but apparently something was misunderstood, and it got put away when I left, and it didn't get out there. And so I had to really understand what was happening. I said, did I not communicate it clearly, or was there something missing? So when I went back out there, I presented another level of technology, and the people that were there were profoundly affected by it, and they realized what it was capable of, so they decided to put it to a test. And once that happened, they put it out, and literally for the last several months, it's been at it's about 100 kilometers away from Fukushima. It's one of the first habitable towns out of the dead zone, out of the hot spots. But it's still, they get waves of radiation there. And they said the people there were really in hopelessness states. They didn't know what to do. They thought their lives were over. And then they introduced the live stream technology to them, and they noticed people were gathering in the fields. They were, and they noticed over a period of days, the people were starting to change. Then they started to be hopeful. They started to see the future, and they started to, consciously shift, and their physical bodies were changing at the same time. They were no longer burdened with this stress and this, this radiation sickness at the same levels. And so this is where it took this monumental shift just recently, getting this information, and traveling there twice and planting these seeds. It was the clearest message. Japan is where that this will take the next level. So planting the seeds of conscious shift, I could not interfere with it. I could only remind, and I went stagnant in my own journey. And this is where it gets very interesting, because I went after Japan, I went to Dubai, then I went to India, and had profound, transformations within myself in India, being touched by the Siddha. He did not just bless me. He literally physically grabbed me, and everyone was kind of shocked, that they said, we've never seen Siddha touch anyone before. So going through that physical transformation, and everything that happened after that, it would take a whole other show to talk about this stuff, but it's the tangible. It's not in the ethereal planes. It's not theoretical. There's tangible evidence of these transformations, these shifts that are happening on the planet, and that is my dedication in my journey, is to show this to people. The live stream technology is tangible. It's not a theory. These devices, there's no trickery about it. They are pure energy, generators, and made by me. Everyone's built by me with the human intention to do just that, is to awaken people to their higher capabilities, to remove them out of the illusion. So when I went through that, and then when we finished the journey in Egypt, I went to Amsterdam, then I went to Egypt, and I was supposed to continue and go to Jordan, then Israel after Egypt, which would have been 7 countries. But when I had such profound experiences happen in Egypt, things that I never thought would happen, that happened within my own human system, past my research. And what happened is I just stopped there. And I said, I can't go any further, because I literally had a vision of myself. I was going to go to the Dome on the Rock in Jerusalem, and I literally saw myself standing on the rock and exploding into fragmented pieces all over the earth. And I said, I'm not ready to do that yet. So I literally stopped and stayed in Egypt for a few more days, and that's when more of the secrets were uncovered to me. So what really happened in my journey, that I went through, the only thing I can really call it, there's 2 terms. I call it spiritual vertigo, that happened within my own human system, is that I was given such profound information and knowledge, but I was trying to utilize it in old paradigm methods. And it was causing me to short out. And I could not find that balance. I was trying to utilize it in my old life, and I was getting nothing. And so I literally, what I would call, I humbly call it falling from grace. And I literally fell out of the light, and I put myself into a cocoon for 3 months. I didn't socialize with anybody. I didn't even know what was happening with current events. Most of the days I sat in absolute silence and meditated and just contemplated and literally admitted to me falling down and bruising myself in the divine light. And I realized it was all part of the humbling experience that I would have to go through. And it was finished It's me literally being ejected from everything that I had comfort in my life. And where I was living, I was told I could stay there, and then 3 days later, I was told I couldn't, and I was ejected from it. There was no choice in the matter. I couldn't keep, I couldn't give them money or anything. They just kept saying no, and I found that very interesting, and that's where I did my work and my business and my living. And I said, wow, this is very interesting, and I think I realized what's going on. So I completely accepted it, and I said, I see this as the great gift that it is. So I took everything that I owned and I put it into storage facilities. And I am in a rent-a-wreck right now of like a 91 Honda Accord, and everything that I have is everything that I've had for the last 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. And I've just been in a transient stage. I've been literally traveling from place to place. Sometimes, I've been in hotels, and it's been really amazing, but I've been in people's homes. I was, wonderfully. I had the wonderful blessing to go into Ayana's temple and spend the night and share space with her last week, which was absolutely beautiful. And I was so grateful. And then I started to understand, okay, I have to get out there. I have to remove myself from the comfort of what was holding me from not being the force that I can be. And I realized that I'm my own worst enemy. And I have so many deep-seated programs in me that only allow me to go so far. And I've had like multi-million-dollar businesses. Like I said, I had a $3 million a year effects company, 18 employees, 20,000 square feet. But the arc of that was not sustainable to take it past a certain point. Every time I had an idea, I made it work. And I had employees within, a short amount of time, running a machine. And then I would stop it on my own. So this is something I had to really look back and go, I'm my own worst enemy. I have a program in me that limits me, for the abundance streams. So, and it's not allowing me to do this global work. But then I realized if it did happen, if I was given back then all the money that I needed, I would have done more harm than good because I was still in my ego. I was still acting from a dualistic aspect. And you cannot realize that until you have realization that you were in it. And I became so humble 2 weeks ago. I realized my pride was in the way, and that I immediately acknowledged. I said, I had this hidden pride, and I didn't even realize it. I wouldn't share it with anybody. And then all of a sudden, I realized I have to talk about this. I have to share my journey with others because there are others in the same situation that are getting this gift as I am, but they see it as a curse and what's wrong with them. So I've been posting my situation and doing video logs, on my Facebook page and sharing it with people, and it's been incredible. I've had literally, a couple hundred people, send me emails saying, I'm so glad you're doing this. I can so relate. I'm going through the same thing, you're not dwelling in lower frequencies. You're seeing this as a gift. Your vibration, is at a very high state, and I can see the humbleness in your journey. And I was just so grateful that people are getting that, and that I can be vulnerable and intimate and share. Because I know, this is part of, breaking these patterns that bind us. And I know consciously, even from a radio show like this, the conscious family that is listening might be another piece of the puzzle when we realize that we are ready, and we are truly ready to shift the paradigm for the conscious good on this planet. Because there's amazing ways that we can turn, this planet, and the people over consciously so easily. And it's all about breaking them free of the illusion. But we have to be careful of that. Just like the messages that were planted in the Matrix when Morpheus was talking to Neo after pulling him out. He said, these are the people that we are trying to save. But they are so inert in the system, so, attached to it, they will fight to the death to keep it, because they don't realize that they are in an illusion. So this is where we have to understand, the finite balance to gracefully, be the way showers and to show people the doors, not to push them through it, but to show them that a door that they did not realize exists, then to give them the choice to walk through it.
This
I really
is true.
think this has been the basis of my journey, is to become into that level of humbleness and realization to be able to hold that door open for whoever chooses, and not to be judged, not to judge, not any level of judgment if someone chooses to go the other way.
Yes, indeed. Wow, time really flew by. I'm already planning your next visit, John. This was, I can tell by the feedback that this was awesome. Wasn't he awesome, family? I could honestly say this is one of, and I've done a lot of shows, but this was one of the more enlightening shows that I have done here on Occult Science Radio. And I can tell this show is going to get a lot of likes. We're going to see this all over Twitter and Facebook, and somebody is going to YouTube it. Because that always happens with a lot of Occult Science Radio shows. We take a lot of our shows and, we turn them into YouTube videos, come to find out that someone else already did. And I hope that's what happened, because the information that you taught us here tonight, brother, really needs to be, widespread. And like I said, I'm already planning your next, I should say, visits. Okay, because now you are a member of the family, and I can assure you, you're going to be appearing on Occult Science Radio on a frequent basis, my friend. Count on that.
Well, it would be a great honor for me to return, and, I will promise that I will be very open, very vulnerable, very intimate, to share, from the heart, and that's all that you will truly get from me. Is everything that I have done in my due diligence to connect the dots, to share it. It is nothing that I am to keep coveted. It is nothing that I am to keep secret. I have to share it with everyone else who is seekers like myself.
True indeed. And so just take a few minutes to let everybody know what you got going on, what you got coming up, any information that you want to share with us, your website, your Facebook, your Twitter, any information that you might want to share with the family.
Well, excellent. Well, I do have, of course, you can reach out to me personally through Facebook, which is John D. Riley. That's R-I-L-E-Y. Also, I have the Livestream Generator and the Oculus page, which actually we talk more about the technology there and share. And my primary website is zeropointresearch.com, like you stated earlier. I did announce just a few days ago, after sitting very deeply, I realized that it's time to go to the next level. So I just recently announced that I will be doing a live stream tour throughout the United States, which I will be getting an RV, and I will be traveling to different destinations, and I will be presenting the technologies for whoever wants it. So this is something I'm going to dedicate 2 to 3 months of my life to just literally hop in an RV and travel around the greater United States to do this. So anyone who wishes to do this can contact me directly, through either John at zeropointresearch.com, or you could do it through Facebook from the Livestream Generator page, and I'll literally be orchestrating the journey, and we'll be setting the dates. I am also looking for someone that would be willing to donate for the cause a really nice, dependable RV where I can literally pack up the technology. I might even have my kids with me, on this journey partially, and and if someone is willing to donate that, they will receive an M400 Consciousness, which is the big tower that which is everyone's favorite technology. It's the biggest one. It's over 6 feet tall. That will be made for you by me. It's a $23,000 value, and that would be a gift. Or if anyone is working to connect me to someone who has that, they will receive a live stream technology as well, an M100. So I'm being very gifting if the family comes together and puts this together for me. Now, I open myself up to present into people's homes, into people's yoga or wellness centers, churches, stadiums, you name it. If you're feeling that you want to, be an ambassador to bring this technology forth, trust me, it's tangible technologies. We're going to have 5 different ones with us, and it is time to really show, the world what this is capable of. I've been very honored because we have, technologies, over 500 of them in various countries around the world. And it's just really amazing that people have been connecting word of mouth via the internet, via people's experiences. But now I really want to take it to the next level. So this summer is kind of the 2012 shift that I really feel is important, is to plant these seeds.
Yes, indeed. And I just want to take this time, my friend, not just coming from me, but coming from the entire Occult Science Radio family. We want to take this time to extend a lot of love and a wholehearted thanks for you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us on Occult Science Radio. My brother, believe me, we were just scratching the surface here, because from watching your video content, believe me, you have so much more to share. But we all love you and we all support you. And yes, you're going to be on Occult Science Radio on a frequent basis. Thank you so much, beloved brother, and be well, and we look forward to having you back again.
No, thank you so much, and much love to you and everyone that's listening, and all the Soul family. It's time. It's time. It's that simple.
It's true indeed. And we also want to be well, my friend, and we will be talking shortly.
Excellent. And I will see you on the East Coast.
I look forward to it, my brother.